A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P. From the ABCs to pomp and circumstance, it all happens so quickly, and we parents are there for our children. Hi, this is Sharon Marshall Lockett, your host on Home Sweet Homework. Is you. We have an exciting program planned for you today leading up to freedom, leading up to the 4th of July. Our summer theme in Home Sweet Homework is building bridges, and today's theme is building bridges to our heritage of freedom. We'll learn about the history of freedom. We'll hear people talk about what freedom means to them. We'll explore some things that you parents can do in celebration with your children to pass on the heart of the message, not just the facts. You see, if freedom doesn't touch their hearts, our grandchildren won't be free. The American Revolution brought about the legal separation of the American colonies from Great Britain. From there, the Declaration of Independence was written and signed and finally approved on July 4th, 1776. 1 year later, on July 4th, 1777, Rhode Island fired 13 gunshots on July 4th to celebrate freedom. In 1778, 2 years after the Declaration of Independence was signed, George Washington marked July 4th with a double ration of rum for his soldiers and an artillery salute. John Adams and Ben Franklin held a dinner for their fellow Americans in Paris, France. 5 years after the signing of the Declaration of Independence, Massachusetts became the first state legislature to recognize July 4th as a state celebration. Other states followed, and in 1870, the U.S. Congress made Independence Day an unpaid holiday for federal employees. It wasn't until 1938 that Congress officially changed Independence Day to become a paid federal holiday for our nation. Sometimes history happens quickly, sometimes it's a long time in the making. Sometimes recognitions are immediate, and sometimes recognitions for bravery and for freedom are posthumous. What does Independence Day mean to me? So many images run through my mind, and of course, first and foremost is the amazing fireworks spectacular. I grew up with it. I grew up with street fireworks, kind of limited by budget and limited by fire laws because I live in sunny, fire-prone Southern California. But fireworks are what first comes to mind when I think of 4th of July and of freedom. But I have to confess that most of my life I've taken freedom for granted. A few years ago, I was on a trip to a country that really isn't free. When we would go on our tour groups, people would join in and listen. I thought how strange. I might eavesdrop from a distance when I was near a tour group to hear what the tour guide had to say. But in this case, wherever we stopped, somewhere between 2 and 10 people would simply close in on our little group and listen to what the tour guide had to say. 2/3 of the way through the tour, I learned that those 2 to 10 people were not just tourists eavesdropping like I might have done. Rather, they were Secret Service police, making sure that the tour guide and the tour participants didn't say anything that was offensive or contra to their beliefs. I realized then that we who are fortunate enough to live in America will never comprehend what it's like not to be free. We're able to speak our minds, sometimes embarrassingly. One of my most amazing 4th of July memories was July 4th, 1986. It was my first visit to New York, and I got to see the unveiling of the facelifted Statue of Liberty. It was an amazing, once-in-a-lifetime experience. We watched the Statue of Liberty lit up, we heard amazing patriotic music, and we saw firework displays set off from barges spaced along the Hudson River with the Statue of Liberty in the background. My son and I shared this wonderful expression of freedom, this wonderful expression of July 4th, this celebration that we're part of a nation that believes in the rights of the individual. It is important that we pass that heritage on to our children. You know, in our political system, we fight it out, we duke it out, we disagree over beliefs. We are free to speak our mind. Sometimes it seems like to our detriment. Are we Democrats? Are we Republicans? Are we independents? Or are we all Americans? And another image of freedom, of the celebration and the meaning behind July 4th, came in some of the cartoons that followed our tragedy on 9/11. One of the images that I keep in my computer and periodically review and periodically use in a workshop shows New York before 9/11. The Twin Towers are there, the skyline is there, beautifully outlined. And right below it, it has New York after 9/11. The Twin Towers, of course, are gone. In their place are tall American flags, and the entire city is lined in red, white, and blue. Never are we more together than when we Americans face a crisis. We can battle out policies, but when things really count, we put on a united front because freedom is our heritage. So how do we build the bridge of freedom into the hearts of our children? Perhaps part of the answer is by keeping our personal family history alive. Let's hear from a few people about that.
I also think of my father who was killed in World War II. I also think of people who serve our country in other ways, whether it's volunteerism, whether it's serving as a council member or supervisor.
Fireworks.
Whoa, fireworks.
Barbecue. Me, Desert Storm.
So here's an idea, parents. On this 4th of July, share your extended family history. How did you come to be free? How did your family come to live in America? What does freedom mean to you personally? And then do some family project together that expresses it. Now, what are family projects? Well, they can be just about anything you want them to be. Children love to draw pictures about what they hear. So you might talk about your family history and say, which of you can draw the best picture that depicts Uncle so-and-so, Grandpa so-and-so? Our journey from Italy to America. Do you have a family full of musicians? Write a song about it. Write your own little family song about your little family history and sing it together. Celebrate freedom. Celebrate from the heart of what makes you American. Is sports your thing? Oh, I know a lot of families that always pick up a football game with the family for July 4th. Do it. But as you play your games, as you do your picnics, as you have your barbecues, as you watch the fireworks, talk about what it means to you and instill freedom in the hearts of your children. Now I want to move to the issue of music. There are some songs that bring tears to my eyes. Pomp and Circumstance is one. I don't have to hear much of it before the tears are just streaming because it touches a place deep in my soul. Patriotic songs are like that. Let's listen and see how you react emotionally to these wonderful patriotic songs.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light?
I'm already emotional, and with that song, I want to stand and put my hand over my heart. What reaction, what emotional reaction do these songs, these wonderful songs, elicit from you? Here are a few stanzas by 7-year-old Rima Marvan.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light?
Wow. I bet your children can do that well. Something else that touches my heart at a very deep level are the armed forces songs. How many of them do you recognize? How many of them could you sing? And do your children recognize them? If not, you may want to get them and play them and sing them as part of your family celebration this year. They need to become a part of our children's heritage. Here's a question for you. How many of them did you recognize, and did they touch your heart? And how can you make those songs touch the hearts of your children? Part of what we're talking about when we look at heritage like this is values. And values are a part of that spiritual part of us. If we don't live in concert with our values, we will mess up our lives. So part of what you want to do by giving your children this heritage is to have them get in touch with what they value in life. Now, there are some universal values. One of the universal values is truth. Everyone deserves to be told the truth, even when the truth is painful. Not the hurtful truth, but the real truth. So part of our responsibility as parents is teaching our children how to tell the truth, even when it's painful. Another universal value is fidelity. People deserve your loyalty. They need to know about being faithful to you. And in children, that comes about with standing up when someone's being bullied. I just read a wonderful best friend article. It was about a boy who was a little bit different. He was ADHD. He didn't sit still like everyone else, and he was just the prime victim for the bullies on campus. He went to a new school, and two young men, young boys actually, about his age, about 10, walked up to him, and he thought, oh no, here we go again. And instead they walked up and said, hi, I'm so-and-so, and introduced themselves. They helped him negotiate his new reality at school. They became his best friends. They gave him dignity. They were loyal to him. Fidelity is a universal value that we need to teach our children. And a third universal value is respect. It's funny when I meet someone in the armed forces and they say, hello, ma'am, because I'm not used to being called ma'am. But the fact that we teach our young men and women in the armed forces to speak respect is something that I incredibly admire. And of course, we give that back to them. One of the tragedies of the war in Vietnam, which was the war of my generation, is that when our soldiers came home, they didn't come home to cheers. They kind of came home to nothing, and in some cases to booze. We didn't respect their role in keeping America free. I know the war was horrible, and I know there are a lot of mixed feelings about the war today, but our beef is not with our soldiers, and we need to respect them We need to honor them. We need to give them dignity. So a part of what we need to do on this 4th of July is to instill in our children a pride in who they are and to help them learn how to use the universal values of truth, fidelity, and respect. It spills over into all aspects of their lives. Will it help them in the classroom? You bet it will. When they learn to think for themselves, when they learn to value freedom, when they learn to let their heart and head work together in their lives, it will affect them in the classroom, and it will affect their teachers. When they learn the language of respect, they won't be blurting out rude questions. Rather, when they need to ask a question, they'll think about it and phrase it in a respectful way, one that will get them responses. So I challenge you on this July 4th to spend some time with your children, passing on the universal values, passing on to them pride in the country in which we live, passing on to them the rights that freedom gives. But freedom also brings with it some responsibilities. I'm always reluctant to quote political people because people are so emotional about whether they're Democrat or Republican. But there is a great quote by our former president, Ronald Reagan. So whatever you think of his politics, would you listen instead to his words? He says, freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same, or one day we will spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it was once like in the United States, where men were free. Well, I agree with Reagan that it doesn't come through our bloodstream, but it certainly comes through our heritage, and we certainly have a responsibility and a right to pass our heritage on to our children. Now, we have a great question of the week this week. The question of the week comes from a father who says, I've tried to teach my children to think for themselves and to make their own decisions and to ask questions and to be informed, and their teachers don't seem to want that. Their teachers seem to want them just to obey. Am I wrong? And if not, how do I teach my children to honor and respect the rules of the classroom without violating who they are and their right to be a free thinker? Isn't that a wonderful question? I wish I had a really wonderful answer for it. So I'm going to talk around the subject a little bit instead of being really direct in the answer to this one. First of all, I want to say to you, you are absolutely right to teach your children to think for themselves, to make judgments, to ask questions. But going back to that value thing, they ask questions with respect. So often when children disagree with us, they want to stab us, they want to win. It's win-lose. And win-win is the only way to do life. So that'll take some training on the part of your children. One of the tools that we use to help children bridge that gap is to train them to ask questions that are non-offensive. Ask for clarity. A second tool that we train our children is to put new information into words and then ask for clarification. Now, given this fact, did I hear you right when you said this? Help me think this through. I'm not sure I get it, and if I do, I don't think I agree with it. And a third skill that we help them use to bridge the gap when they have a teacher who doesn't appreciate disagreement is to have them put their assumptions into words and ask for clarification. I have a friend who teaches about the Civil War, and he starts by saying, the South should have won, It is the war between the states because it was not civil, and in my classroom, we will not call it a civil war. Now, part of the reason he does this is to stimulate discussion. Part of the reason he does this is that he belongs to that school that believes that the Civil War was not fought over slavery, but was fought over states' rights. And he supports state rights. So, given that, if he made a statement like that, and I was offended by it, let's say I've got African American descent and I find it racist, then rather than saying that was racist, as our children are prone to do, when I'm trained how to give feedback, how to put assumptions into words and ask for clarification, I would couch what I need to say. In his classroom, I would say, you know, what you just said to us sounded to me racist, but I've never thought of you as being racist. I don't think I quite got what you were trying to say. Well, those are 3 communication tools that you can train your children to use, but definitely encourage them to be free thinkers. Now I want to give you a self-control technique for your children if they find themselves in the classroom of a teacher that absolutely doesn't put up with that kind of discussion. You see, right or wrong, the teacher has the right to set classroom policies and to decide on classroom behaviors. So if your child ends up in the classroom with a teacher that doesn't allow free discussion, one of the tools that you give your children is to take notes on 2 sheets of paper. On one sheet of paper, they take notes on the class. On the other sheet of paper, they have an argument with the teacher, but they have the argument on paper, not out loud. That way it helps them manage their frustration and manage their anger so they don't blurt something out that gets them into trouble. But it also respects the teacher's policy, and it gives them a way to vent without disruption. Okay, we've looked at communication skills, we've looked at some self-control skills when you find yourself in a tough situation. Now I want to give you a parenting skill when you find your child in a class like that. Go in and have a talk with the teacher. If that doesn't resolve it, make an appointment with the school counselor. If that doesn't resolve it, make an appointment with the school vice principal in charge of discipline. If that doesn't resolve it, make an appointment with the principal. But always stand up for your children. Don't always assume that what they tell you is 100% true. It may be 100% from their perspective, but there are always 2 sides to an issue. And when you go in, you want to listen to what the teacher has to say. However, you always want to vote for your children. You always want to help them succeed. You always want to believe in them. So, your set of recourse is to take the situation through the chain of command until you find a resolution. Now, I want to guarantee you that you'll find some kind of resolution by the time you get to the principal. It may be to put your child in another class, but you'll find some form of resolution that way. If you don't, your next step is the school superintendent, and your next step is the school board. And I hope none of you ever have to go through that channel and through that process, but some of you will, because life isn't easy, and especially for today's children. By the way, sometimes you just have personal questions that need a personal answer. I want to invite you to visit our website, homesweethomework.com, and look at the Buy Now button and consider joining our Home Sweet Homework Parent Club. Through that parent club, you'll get a weekly email tip, you'll get a monthly email newsletter, and you will have unlimited email access to our databases and our team of experts to answer your personal. We want to close with a quotable quote, but stay tuned for just a few stanzas of closing music. I can't play it all because of copyright, but you've got a little glimpse of Celine Dion. You've got a little glimpse of Lee Greenwood. You'll get a little glimpse of the late, great Kate Smith. But more importantly, we want to end this 4th of July celebration reminding you that freedom isn't free and that you live in the greatest nation in the world. So here's your quotable quote. Actually, two versions of basically the same quotable quote. That great author Anonymous said, "My liberty ends where another's liberty begins." And on a little more practical level, Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes said, "The right to swing my fists ends where the other man's nose begins." Part of our responsibility as parents is teaching our children where their rights end and where their responsibilities begin. Have a great 4th.